Hey everyone, welcome to the Conversations with Adrian podcast. Today I'm joined by Thomas Malucelli. Thomas, thank you so much for joining me.
Adrian, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, how was the pronunciation? Malucelli. Yeah,
Nailed it. Or
perfect.
should I have said it like this? Nailed it.
That's exactly right. I'm Italian from the waist down. My dad's Italian and mum's Aussie. So we have been hanging around all the Europeans all my life. Getting that CH instead of C is a critical thing.
I love it. I love how you said you from the waist down. That's what I always say as well.
That's my running joke. Yeah. Well, what part of Italy are you from? Are your parents
I'm
from?
I'm from Tuscany, so a
Nice.
small town near Florence in the countryside. I was born and raised there, and then mom is English. So if you hear a bit of an interesting accent, that's why. But born and raised in Tuscany, and then left Italy when I was 23. Went to
Yeah.
America, and I've been in Sydney for approximately 10 years.
Oh wow. Yeah, nice. Tuscany is absolutely beautiful. My dad's family is from Calabria, or actually from Bagnara in Calabria. So like all way down south. And yeah, it's a beautiful little town. You've ever been?
I have. I haven't been to that specific town, but I went to Calabria once with a girlfriend of mine. We took a road trip from Tuscany down all the way to Calabria for a
Yeah.
week. And I was just mesmerized by the beauty of that region, like the sun and then the spicy food, the salsiccia. And they have this, I forget the name of it. They've got this really specific spicy sausage and oil, enduja. It's called enduja, and
Uh-huh.
they put it everywhere. It's just divine. So yeah,
So,
Calabria
yeah.
is crazy, and it's funny because it's so close to Sicily and Africa, so it's really hot there. It's a different type of heat.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, Europe to me is a different type of heat. A couple of years ago, when I sold a business, made a bit of money, and I took the family overseas, and we sort of stationed in Europe, in Macedonia mainly, and then hired a car, and we drove for I think 75 days. And so we kind of drove, for example, from Macedonia to Albania. We caught a ferry from Albania to Bari, and then we took the car off there, and then drove to Bagnara, up to Tuscany, to Bologna, to Rome, Venice, and we just sort of did that whole trip, and then all the way back again. We did like several countries within about 3 months, which was it was an amazing trip.
That's so good. Like you literally, so the first part of the trip, you went through the Bronx of Europe.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
What was
Yeah.
like the most interesting thing you found there? Like, do you have like a interesting or weird memory from the trip? Because I
Um,
can
I,
imagine.
I documented the whole thing. I actually filmed the whole lot because at that time, everyone sort of talks about, like I'm in the coaching space, so everyone was talking about living this laptop lifestyle and how great it is, but not many people were too successful at it. And I'm not saying I was just saying, if I'm going to make this happen, then this would be the opportunity to do that. So I had several clients here in Australia, and so I thought I'll just book this trip. We had some family that were in Italy, but also in Macedonia with my ex-wife's extended family over there. So we sort of stationed ourselves there. And the whole idea was to do it on a budget. So what I did was, because I was making money, but I wasn't making bank, as in I didn't have like waterfront properties and the high end accommodation everywhere. So nothing really planned other than to station ourselves in Macedonia and then just see how we go from there. So first port of call was to kind of get my internet ready and all those sorts of things, because I was traveling for a week, and then I would come back to Macedonia and base myself there, work through all of my clients in 1 week. And that was like first thing in the morning, because we were 12 hours away from here in Australia, 12 hours behind. So I worked there, and then on the following week, I'd take the entire week off and we'd plan a trip, but we just do it on the fly. Booking.com, pick a
So good.
destination, something close. But as far as memorable trips, I mean, look, it was such a test because I had got 3 kids, so we took our 3 kids with us, and just driving on the wrong side of the road, on the wrong side of the car, and particularly when we went through Albania, my brother told me about a place called Samil in Albania, and just getting there was the worst fucking experience of my life. Right, it was just kind of these mountains, which in Australia we've got hills basically, but in Europe you've got mountains. So like these things are just absolutely enormous. It's the laneways are kind of like 2 lanes, but it's really just 1 lane in Australia, the width of 1 lane. and these people are overtaking us, and we're going up this mountain, and it's just going climbing and climbing and climbing, and we're eventually coming all the way down, and it gets to this point where Google Maps says keep going for 1.2 kilometers and then turn left, but we've hit basically dirt. And when I say dirt, I mean the road was just non-existent. There was like potholes everywhere, big rocks, like the car was, just going like this over the top of it. And the homes were mostly vacant. They were mostly desolate. It looked like a fucking spaghetti western where everything was just run down in an abandoned town. And so it got to a point where I was having heart palpitations. I was thought, fuck, I've actually driven my family into a desolate country, which Albania, you hear of all these like bad stories. Anything you want done bad, you go to Albania to get it done, right? So I'm there, and there's hardly any internet connection. I can't see any kind of signs of like city life or anything like that. I thought, I've just driven my family into their death and I don't know what to do. And if we turn back, I've got to go back up that fucking big mountain and come all the way down and go back to Macedonia, which I didn't want. It was already like 8 or 9 hours away. So we eventually just pushed on, and then we saw this sort of township, which is the main city, called Saranda. And we finally got there, and this is like, I don't know if you know, but it's like 50 years of communism, and these guys have just escaped it. It's all sort of getting rebuilt, and there's a lot of new towns, but there's also a lot of old mixed with the new. So you've got these military bunkers and all that kind of stuff. But once you get there, it's absolutely amazing. I just couldn't believe how beautiful it was. Everyone speaks either Macedonian, Greek, obviously Albanian, or they speak Italian. And you can see Corfu from Surrender, right? So this is like the amazing thing that I love about Europe, because you can see Corfu there. We took a day trip, go to Corfu, we come back again. We went to Samil, which is literally like the Tahiti of Europe, to be honest with you. It was just sensational. So yeah, anyway, that's one of many memories.
That's spectacular. When you said Albania, I was like, I lived, I was in Italy for 22 years, and during the communism, Albanians, bless them, used to like go on a boat and just go from their country to Italy, and like 1/4 of them would just like die in the water many times. And then I heard some crazy stories and lived some crazy stories. So I can imagine, man, that was an adventure.
Yeah. That was an adventure of a lifetime. But you know what? My kids would do it again. They were really hesitant to go for an extended period of time. They didn't want to be away from their friends. But now that I've done that, and if I said to them now, listen, do you want to do a gap year and we'll go there for 12 months and pick an area that is easy to live and maybe a bit more central than Macedonia, they would do it in a heartbeat. They would really love it, and just the whole cultural thing. But I found a newfound appreciation. When like I can hear your Italian accent. And when you come to Australia and you hear people with English as a second language, and people get annoyed that like, come to our country, speak the language. But when you go to another person's country and you live in there for several months and you need to learn the language really quickly, geez, you get a newfound appreciation for what immigrants have had to put up with in Australia in order to make a life of things, because that like language barrier was significant. There were so many areas where I just could not bridge the gap. I've got like Google Translate, and I'm speaking into Google Translate and trying to let it flip it around into whatever language I want to, which is not really the same, as in like the dialects are different and the way that the Italian phrases are different. So much respect to the immigrants that have made a life here, for sure.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Like my background is hospitality. I used to be a restaurant manager, and I literally witnessed like 3 people in particular that I employed back in 2013. They came to Australia, Brazilian for the most part, and Croatian, and they came not knowing English pretty much. And they started off as dishwashers because that's the only thing you can do if you don't know the language. Like you can't be with customers, right? But I saw these guys being so resilient, and I saw them wanting to really make a life for themselves and for their family. They were going to work as a dishwasher. They were going to school every day. They were going to private school. And then there's 2 of them now who are now working as lawyers here in Sydney. And I was like, you guys are so inspiring. And it just goes to show what you can do when you really have that vision and that burning desire to make it work for you and your family. It's inspiring.
Yeah. So true. Um, I want to know more about your background. I got connected through a mate of mine, Luke. And Luke Kennedy's been on this podcast a couple of times, and he's an awesome guy. He's telling me more about you, and he told me that you're on The Bachelor, and people are probably watching this going, I know that guy from The Bachelor, but I got to be honest with you, I don't really watch TV, so I don't know you other than the things that I see on socials and all that kind of stuff. But it's obviously more like health based and fitness based, and a lot of mindset, a lot of empowerment, and things like which what I gravitate towards because that's my jam, right? So maybe you can tell me a bit about your background, your history, how you come to Australia, and obviously I want to know about The Bachelor as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't watch TV either, so I am totally with you. I just
You haven't
happened to
seen
be
it
on a
either.
TV show. But yeah, so I came to Australia with the intention of just traveling for a whole year with my ex-partner. And when I arrived in Sydney, I took my resume to this beautiful spot in Sydney and called their bar and dining, and they employed me as a waiter. And I was like, okay, cool. We're gonna stay in Sydney for 3 months, and then maybe go to Gold Coast, and then go to Perth, just do the usual classic touristy thing that everyone does when they come here. And then our plan was to go back to America, where my girlfriend was from. But then after 3 months, they offered me a sponsorship, and I took it. And in the space of 3 years, I went from being a waiter to assistant manager to restaurant manager, and then general manager, and I had a fantastic time in the restaurant. Like, I was really growing really fast. I was making lots of money. I was, having the time of my life. And unfortunately, though, after 3.5 years of doing that, when I became the general manager, I was stressed. Like, my white hair started to come out, and I didn't even know, that I was stressed. Like, I was just living the same day on repeat for years. I would wake up, I would try and go to the gym in the morning because I knew that was a healthy thing to do. But I would just snooze, and get up around like 11 a.m., sometimes 12, and then have a shower, eat on the go, get the train, go in the city, work, have 7 or 8 coffees just to like make it through the day because I was always sad I wasn't eating well. And then at nighttime I was like, oh my God, we've made it. We've just served 200 customers. You know what? Let's relax. Let's open a bottle of wine. Let's get some shots. Let's get some pizza. Go to bed at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. on repeat. Can you imagine that? Like 2 or 3 years like that. And then I'll never forget, there was this one particular morning where I woke up in my apartment in Bondi Junction, and my alarm I just could not stop my alarm. Like, I snoozed it probably like 10 times. Then eventually I got out of my bed. It was 1 p.m. and I looked at myself in the mirror, and I could literally see it all. Like, I had poor posture. I had like these really big bags under my eyes. I could see my reflection, but I wasn't proud of who I was inside. Like, no muscle, like I had a gut, no energy. And that was the day when I was like, okay, this needs to start changing. And that was the day that my girlfriend at the time also gave me an ultimatum. And she was like, look, if you don't change your lifestyle, I will find someone else to build my life with. And it was like a huge freaking knife at the heart. And I was like, okay, this is it. This is a sign. And I didn't tell you as well that during those years, I was heavily taking drugs every weekend. I was many things, but the drugs were like the biggest problem, because I would just bender every weekend, and then I would spend the first few days of the week just like trying to get back to normal. And so that day was a massive day. It was a day where I made that decision, and I, like Tony Robbins says, when you go onto an island, just burn the boats. And so I burned the boats. I cancelled from my phone book all the names of people that used to deal drugs to me, and I started to not hang out with people who were in the party scene, so I wasn't inspired to adopt certain behaviors. And slowly but surely, I started to change my life. I started through nutrition, like implementing an easy nutrition system that helped me with my energy and mental clarity. And that then gave me the energy to go and work out in the morning. I was working out. And then suddenly, as I was feeling better, I was attracting better things in my life because my energy was going up, my vibration was going up. And so I was like, wait a second, like, I spent all these years like taking drugs to feel better and to connect. Now I'm eating whole foods, I'm moving my body, like I'm in the sun a bit more, I'm doing some breath work, and I feel freaking good every time. I feel as if I was to take drugs now, my vibration would go down as opposed to up because I'm feeling so good. And so that made me curious. And so I started hanging out with people who were entrepreneurs, started going to events, networking events, learning about entrepreneurship and personal development and spirituality. And suddenly I just found a new way, and I found my purpose in helping men and helping other people get out of that rut. And it's been a journey now that I've been taking since 2018. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. It's funny when you get to that point, hey, that little moment in the mirror where you just disgusted in yourself. Would that be an appropriate assumption?
Absolutely. Disgusted. Like, like I was putting on a mask every day. Like people were like, oh, I didn't know you were feeling that way because I had this mask. But if you were to tell me who are you when no one's watching, I felt like a slug, disgusted, completely disgusted, not proud of myself.
Hmm. Do you think that there's a lot that you may have discovered along the way in terms of that mask that you talk about, as well as perhaps belief systems or maybe value systems that you feel that you may have inherited along the way? Like, do you feel like you've kind of gone in a course that was left of center, which is like your true north? Does that make sense? Like, I find that there's a period in my life where I felt like I was following a path that I thought was right, but it almost got to a point where I had that sort of wake up call type of moment. And I just realized just how far off that path that was inauthentic to my true north that I was. But I was almost under the illusion that that was the right way to go. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Like I mean I chose hospitality mostly because it's been in my family for years, and so I was born and raised in a restaurant, and then it just made sense to choose that career when I left Italy because it's easy, right? You go and work in restaurants, you can make money, you can travel. But then, like you said, I had those moments where my soul was just begging me to become more, to do more, and I just didn't know how to really connect to my spirit or my soul, like to my heart, let's say, because I just kept distracting myself with porn and casual sex and drugs and alcohol just to like not be with myself. But then when I fully understood it, um, I had to take a knee and really understand where I was going. Then that's when I understood that I use this analogy of, like, when a hose is kinked, like the more kinks the hose has, the less flow the water have. My hose was really kinked, and I had to like unkink it until finally I understood that, okay, like I've been on the wrong path for so long, but that path has taught me who I don't want to be, and it's taught me where I want to go. And so despite me going through that path, I'm so grateful for it because now I'm able to share those lessons and those and what I've been through to now help the person that I used to be.
Hmm. I think that makes the best coaches, to be honest. Like when you're speaking from lived experience and you can totally relate to the depths of despair that someone may have experienced on a similar level, that place that you come from is much more authentic, it's much more genuine, and it's much more considerate in terms of how you would direct and diagnose and I guess find the correct application for the particular person that you're dealing with. So I think that there's a tremendous value in seeking out people who have done the things that you want to do or have come from a place that you want to escape from. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
So like that to me is, I always look to coaches who have had the business that I want, the lifestyle that I want. They've got that kind of, they've got, for me, for example, their family values, all those sorts of things need to be congruent with how they live their life. And then I can feel like that particular person is going to be guiding me in the best way possible, as opposed to someone who seems to have like a business persona, but then you can see on their personality side or their non-business persona seems to be like out of alignment. It's almost like they got this charm and charisma on one side, and it's very flamboyant and quite attractive, but then on the other side, it just seems like a house of cards, and there's a lot of like sort of falsities and misaligned values and things like that. Do you find that?
I find that, yes, and I find that especially in this day and age, like the coaching world is full of those people. They promise you things but haven't actually walked the talk. I don't know about you, but like I have a really high bullshit detector, so I can tell right away. I can tell straight away if somebody is authentic, if they are genuine, if they are walking the talk. You can tell by the results and just by how they show up. Um, so yes, I definitely agree and can relate to what you're saying.
Yeah, there's a presence about someone that you can feel that just gets it,
Yeah.
and when you're in alignment with those sorts of people, everything starts to flow, really nicely. So I'm interested to know though, when you talk about like the kinks in your hose you were talking about, the image that comes to my mind, or the kind of I don't know, almost like a diagram of each one of those kinks would be relationship to self, relationship to others, inner conflict, emotional trauma, something to do with the past, those sorts of things. Where did you find was the biggest growth opportunity or the biggest learning curve that was that trajectory from escaping that world, which was just full of like um I guess fake highs and a way of kind of coasting through life to where you are now?
That's a really good question. It's been a series of events that have taken me to the place where I understood what was the major kink. But I believe that the major one was when to put it in context, I had the most beautiful soulmate for 7 years, and we hit it off like a house on fire. Like, we were traveling, having the best time. And then suddenly, though, we started to part ways because I was very much into my feminine and she was in her masculine energy. So we just weren't compatible. And that was the major kink for me, like not being able to connect at a deep level with my girlfriend and vice versa. And I became quite egotistical and selfish. Like I was always a very good partner, but deep inside, like I was more focusing on my business and my image, not prioritizing our relationship. And at the time, it was all I knew to do. Like I was doing my best at what I had. But then when we broke up, I went through a stage where like so many negative emotions hit me all at once, like guilt and anger and sadness and resentment. And in the past, I would have gone and distracted myself with drugs, friends. Let's go and drink. Let's just do anything I can to just not feel what I was going through. But this particular time, I was like, you know what? I need to break this cycle. I need to actually feel what's going on. And it was one of the hardest things I did. Like I remember I was at home and I just sat on the ground and I just like started crying. Started crying. At one point I was like laying underneath my desk, just like a mess, crying, listening to music, and I was like, "Holy shit, what is happening?" And then I called a friend, coach of mine, and he introduced me to this um, Wayne Dyer, who is an author and the most incredible person who now is dead, but he's written a few books. And that particular night, I started reading The Power of Intention, and his voice was just soothing me and guiding me. And that book introduced me to the ego. And after 33 years of my life, I was like, holy shit, I've been living all my life with a mask, like with this ego. And as I recognized that I had this ego, everything crumbled. My identity crumbled, like everything. And so I spent probably like one whole month or 2 months maybe just not knowing who I was anymore. Identity crisis. Like I started like buying books on sex, on spirituality. I remember like picking up The Way of the Superior Man, and that book as well just blew my mind. And I could just see situations where I was arguing with my girlfriend, and as opposed to being superior man, confident and certain, and wanted to go there and change his state, making her feel secure and loved, I was just avoiding and going elsewhere. And I could just see how our distance grew further and further through my behaviors to who I was now. And so that just blew me away. And that was the moment where everything started to shift. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. There's a few things I picked up on. When you say she was in her masculine, you were in your feminine, how do you describe that? Like, to me, the masculine and feminine, this whole thing is a fascinating topic, and it's obviously such a buzz thing at the moment in terms of energetically, but I understand the energetics of it. But I'm keen to know, as someone who I feel was in his feminine for a long time, um, I'm keen to know what you thought that was, or what you think your feminine attributes were, or that feminine energy is.
Totally. So because we weren't having the best time in our relationship, obviously, my partner had closed off. And so she had closed off. She didn't feel safe around me. I mean, she did feel safe, but she didn't feel safe in her feminine. She didn't feel as if I was taking control. She didn't think I was decisive enough. And it was true. Like I was letting her make all the decisions because we went through in a relationship, I unconsciously and ignorantly thought that if I made her get all those decisions, then it would make her happy, feeling in control. But the more she did that, the more she understood that she couldn't trust me to be a man and guide her. I didn't have vision for where we were going. And she just built this persona. And the more she built herself up, the more I would like diminish myself. And the more I became this like yes man, to the point where we were so polarized that we stopped having sex for 9 months. And I remember this was the hardest thing ever because I knew that she was my soulmate. I knew that she was the woman I wanted to marry, and I knew that she would be the best mom ever. But we were so polarized that I would literally be at work thinking all day long, I want to have sex with her. I need to have sex with her. And I just couldn't. And I said to myself, I would almost hypnotize myself by saying, I'm going to go home tonight. I'm going to be a man. I'm going to grab her and I'm going to have sex with her because that's what she wants. And that was our problem. We weren't having sex anymore. And I would get home and I just couldn't do it. And instead, obviously a man needs to pleasure himself. I would just go and watch porn and fix myself to watching porn. And I got to the point where porn became my escapism. And that vicious circle went on for almost 10 months and then we broke up.
Wow. Yeah, I relate to that. I think the distraction in terms of not really addressing any problems, as I think when you seem to be a people pleaser, would you relate to that? You just you want to be liked, okay, and I don't want to disappoint anyone, and I want to be easygoing. I don't like people who are rigid or sort of stuck in their ways, or they're not malleable to a large degree. So in turn, you start to agree to everything, and you start to say yes to everything, and you drop everything at a moment's notice, and you help others out. And it's almost like it's a virtue to do that. But then you find over a period of time, you've kind of given away most of yourself, and then you don't know who you are, which is the identity crisis that you were talking about before. Because you're like, I don't know who the fuck I am, because all I've done is just wanting to do the right thing by others, thinking it was a virtuous thing to do, or the right thing. But here we are, feeling lost and directionless, and not knowing what decision to make in life, because I never really had to make many decisions. I just sort of abdicated that role to someone else.
Totally. And, when we are in that position, not knowing, we feel very vulnerable. We feel very helpless. We think, what the fuck? Like, what am I meant to do here? But that is such an important stage, I think, because once you strip all this shit away and you strip who you think you need, who you think you are, and you strip who you want to show yourself to be to people who don't even care about you, then it's just yourself. And then that's when you can really take a knee and think, okay, what are my values? What is my vision for the future? What gets me excited? What is my big dream? And then that's when you can recreate yourself authentically. It's a process, but that's a really magical moment, I believe.
So when did The Bachelor come into play with all this stuff? How did you end up on that show?
That was a funny moment. So The Bachelor happened last year, actually. Well, it went on air this year, but we recorded last year. And I was just at home. I was just hustling, building my business. I wasn't really dating at all. I was just focusing on building my online business. And then this lady just randomly messaged me on Instagram, and she said to me, "Hey, we're looking for hot guys and single guys for a TV show. Are you interested?" And I was thinking, this is bullshit. This will be like, one of those scam messages. But I was like, hey, you know what? I'm single. I'm ready to mingle. And she was like, perfect. You want to have a WhatsApp call at 3:00? I'm like, yeah. Jumped on the call. It was the real deal. She was casting for The Bachelor. And from then onwards, I spent a month and a half just having, Skype calls and medical tests. And then before I knew it, I was in. And for me, it was like, okay, shit, like I've been single now for almost 2 years. I love to live out of my comfort zone. And so the idea of going on TV like, you know, talking to girls, dating girls was like so uncomfortable because I wasn't used to it. You know, talking about kids and marriage and visions for the future on national TV. That's crazy.
Mhm.
I was like, sign me up. I mean, this is going to be a really good growth journey. And if I can find my soulmate, even better. And so went on and had a fantastic time. Unfortunately, I didn't find the love of my life, but I learned a massive lesson that has helped me now in how I show up in my relationships. So really grateful for it.
Mm. Um, I'm interested to ask, like, in terms of behind the scenes and how that show is constructed. Are you allowed to speak out in terms of just how much of it is authentic and how much of it is planned? I mean, like, it it's a fascinating show, the way it all works. And I used to watch the first Bachelor, probably seasons 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, when they first come out, which is years ago now. But I'm interested to know, behind the scenes, was there any sort of surprises there, or was it actually less surprising in the sense of how kind of authentic and real that actually was?
Yeah, look, I actually thought the same as well. And from going on it, I can tell you that 85% of what happens is authentic, it's real. When you go on the show, obviously you have all these beautiful women that you know you could end up with, and you tell your producer, okay, like out of these 10, just so you know, I'm really interested in, you know, 1, 2, and 3, Samantha, Joyce, and Anna, let's say, right? And so once you name your girls, they are untouchable. The rest, what happens happens. So yeah, there's a little bit of room for drama. There has been some scenes where, for example, you know, shit happens and the producers are like, look, Thomas, if we show this, you're gonna look like a dickhead, so go back and change what you said to this girl. And then it becomes like almost you're acting essentially. But 80% is real. What happens though later on is that there's a massive situation where the editors will go on like cuts and do a magical job of editing, and so you never know what could happen in editing. Like, for example, there was one scene where like I told the producers, like, I'm not really interested in dating any single moms. Nothing wrong with a single mom. My mom has been a single mom. My vision of the future is, if I want to create a life, I want to do it from scratch with my partner.
Mhm.
And so that's why I'm making this decision. And so they suddenly thought, okay, drama. So they brought in 3 single moms without telling me. And then there was this one situation where we had a pool party. And then in the space of 40 minutes, after 2 weeks, all these 3 moms came to me and say, hey, by the way, I'm a mom. Hey, by the way, I'm a mom. Hey, did you know I've got 3 kids? And I took it really well. I was like, no way, really? That's awesome. But then when you look at the actual series, when the first mom tells me I have a kid, they cut me, and my reaction is this.
Right.
I was watching and I was like, no way, you
Uh,
fuckers.
yeah. Now Thomas looks like a dick because he doesn't want
Absolutely. I
to.
copped it. I copped it from so many moms, and I was like, well, you know what, whatever.
That's funny. There's an interesting dynamic at plays in there where you've got, I really find it fascinating when you listen to a guy's preferences in terms of what he wants in a woman versus when you listen to a woman, what they want in a man. There's some interesting dynamics at play in terms of how they express the certain things. You know, like, you're obviously looking more towards the future, which is, you know, highly a masculine thing. Like, I want to create something for the future, and I want to think 5, 10, 15 steps ahead. So if I'm going to do that now, it's almost like you're playing chess. You've got your moves set out now, but you know exactly when you're going to be, you know, making the checkmate move down the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
And
producer is quite clever though. They've set you up really nice.
yeah. And the woman just wants to feel, right? It's about the moment, it's about the emotions. Like, it's all about how she feels in the moment. And, you know, yeah, it's very different. It's funny. Relationships, I think, are the most fascinating topic that we could ever talk about.
Yeah, 100%. The relationships to me is the most personal growth I've ever experienced in
Same.
the breaking up and breaking down, you know, of a relationship and marriage and things like that, and then the rekindling and building one from a position of, okay, this is the new version of me that I want to express myself in. So coming from this particular side of the coin now, how am I going to project this energy, this being, this way of life, this character, these values, these
Mm.
traits that I want to convey. So I need to be congruent and authentically in alignment with what I want to project out there. Otherwise, I'm just going to fall back into the trap of the old version of Adrian, which I've grown to not like. I appreciate where he's come, but it's kind of like I'm done with that version of me. He needs to die, and that ego needs to have a death of some sort, and then I want to project myself from this point on. So
Mm.
yeah, relationships are just the most it's the most heart-wrenching, I guess. So you're the most exposed, you're the most vulnerable, you're the most alone, and you're the most together. Like it's almost like the most ofs are all included in all of that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I do agree, and it's so interesting because the moment that you choose to be in a relationship and a partnership with someone, I mean, yes, it's an intimate partnership, but it's also a business partnership, it's a life partnership, and you choose that partner. Now that I know, like for me, it's going to be like the most exhilarating growth journey because we become a team, and there's no way I'm going to let my team member down at any point in my life. It's days where, there might be days where I feel like not giving, like I feel like 20%, I'm low on energy. And those are the days that my partner might be like, okay, like today, then I'm gonna be 80% to make up for your lack of energy, and then vice versa. Back in the day, I wasn't really thinking that way. And so now going through what I've been through, and I'm sure you would agree with this, I have set myself to understand exactly what I'm looking for, what values I'm into. Like, are we compatible? Like, what is your vision for the future? And in the past, I used to be so focused on the aesthetics and how a girl would look, and then I would be so quick in having sex with someone, and then when you have sex with someone, obviously you bond so much quicker. All those chemicals will block out any red flags that you might see. And now I'm at the point where, okay, like sex can wait. Sex can wait. Like I want to see if we're really going to have fun, if we really are compatible. And then when the moment happens, the moment happens, and that's going to be the cherry in the cake. Can you
Mm.
relate?
Yeah, absolutely. We're singing from the same hymn book. So I think like what I have experienced in my personal life, coming from a marriage of 20 years to then starting over, is that you there's a few things you have to make sure. I heard once someone say that you need to determine the difference between having similar interests and similar values. And so in order to determine that, well, you need to understand what your values actually are. And one of the things, like you mentioned Tony Robbins before, I did Tony Robbins 30 Days to Personal Power when I was 19, and I wrote out my ideal woman and the values and the interests and all those things that I wanted. And within 3 days, I met her. And then within 18 months, we were engaged and then married, and 3 kids later and all those sorts of things. But what I didn't realize, and what Tony Robbins didn't say back then, at least, was that your values change. And there are catalysts to life, such as having a business, raising children, all those sorts of things, where your paradigm of the world changes. And also there are certain situations, circumstances, and events that shape your values. So your value systems do evolve. And so I never really thought about what my values were until I was like 40. And then now into this stage of my life, it's like reassessing the values again. I think the main part for me, though, Thomas, was that I needed to be courageous enough to know that when there was a red flag, to speak up about it, because the past version of Adrian was to sort of let things slide and just to not be confrontational and to avoid critical conversations, and just to almost have this belief system that, would I rather be right, or would I rather be in love? Like, is it that big of a problem, or should I just let it go? Those sorts of things. And I felt that served in some ways, but in other ways, it actually was quite a hindrance and a blockage to having that deeper connection and that soul connection that I really desired.
Yeah.
So to me, having the courage to know that if there was a red flag there, or something that I wasn't in agreement with, to raise that in such a way that was thoughtful, that was diplomatic, that was without my emotions overriding me. And what was a green flag for me was what response I got, and whether that person ran away or whether that person was confrontational or wanted to create more conflict and to put down and put in your place and all those sorts of things, or whether they had this opinion or attitude of, let's resolve this so we can both get back to being close and being together. And the bond
Yeah.
that was associated, or the direct outcome of working through those sticky points where it did, was a connection that I'd never ever experienced before. And that to me was the moment that it became almost attractive. Like I wanted to run towards problems and run towards confrontation and conflict to see what was on the other side of it, because the other side was juicy and close and intimate. And to me, true intimacy was where you were at your most vulnerable and at your most susceptible to being wounded, and you're at your most, I guess, the most fearful point of losing something that could be potentially amazing. Like the fear of missing out in me was a big thing. And so to not disappoint was something that I really needed to focus on. So that to me was the biggest growth curve, 100%.
I love that. You said something so powerful. And I think like what I take from what you just said is communication, like, having those beautiful talks with your partner, beautiful or not beautiful, but like almost having even like a review every week of how your partnership is going. I learned from a mentor of mine two really powerful questions that I was adopting and I will adopt in my future relationships too. And it's just sitting down and then asking yourself two questions. What am I doing that's bringing you closer to me? And what am I doing that's pushing you further away from me? And being really honest with each other. And that's, I think, when you find that moment, that spark, that connection that you were talking about, when you're being very vulnerable, you're saying things that perhaps can make your partner feel uncomfortable, but you're saying it because you care so much about the relationship and you want to grow together that it's worth it.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's
Yeah.
interesting because you say, for example, I say to myself, I want to be vulnerable without judgment. I want to be as open and honest as I possibly can without having any fear of being ridiculed or criticized or shunned, or have any of that information returned back on me in an unfavorable way. So in order for that to happen, you first need to be super vulnerable in that moment. And so that whatever information I'm telling you could be weaponized and used back against me, depending on the situation and what that person is like. And so in that kind of evokes another level of confrontation in another person who may not be willing to hear those certain things, right? And so they may say to you, I just want you to be open, I want you to be honest, and I want you to tell me things. But in that moment of telling something that is not pleasant to hear is the test. And that's the test is, how do you respond in that moment where it is so frightening and vulnerable and almost hurtful to a degree? Like it can be quite a potent situation where in that moment there could arise a situation where you both want to leave. And that to me is like, it's a careful spot. Yeah, that's right. But the other side is tremendous, and that's the most exciting part. So I'm more than open now to exploring. And I think my experience is that often people are not ready for the level of openness that I'm ready to go down. And I like it when it gets to that point where we're sort of in this really comfortable space where we feel safe enough to divulge certain things that we otherwise just would have kept secrets. And that to me is a large part of my history, is not wanting to say what's truly on my mind or what happened or how I feel for fear of judgment and ridicule and blame and shame and guilt and all of those really dirty, low vibration emotions that kind of just sit in the pit of your stomach and in your sternum, in your heart, and in your throat, clog everything up, you know.
100%, 100%. It's magical, and I feel as well when you get to that point when you're so authentic with your partner, it just you have to stand in your truth, you have to stand in your heart, because the moment they have these conversations and you're not authentically yourself, then you realize how much there is at lose. First and foremost yourself, and then of course whatever happens with your partner. So yeah, I can yeah, it's big, it's powerful. I can relate.
You know, you mentioned Wayne Dyer. One of the first books I read from Wayne Dyer, I actually, do you know what cassettes are? How old are you?
Yeah. I'm 36.
Okay. No, I have to ask because fucking, I'm 45, but there's a generation that does not know what cassettes are, right? So, my mum joined a network marketing company called Amway in the 80s, and every week had a tape or a book of the week. And one of the tapes was "You'll See It When You Believe It" by Wayne Dyer. So that was my first introduction to him when I was 13. But later in life, in another life, I was a real estate agent. I owned a real estate office for 10 years. And there was this secondhand bookstore that was 2 shops up from my office. And I just happened to go past one day, and there was these books for $5 for sale out the front. And the one book that caught my eye was this book called Inspiration by Wayne Dyer. And it was $5. And it was one of the best books I've ever read in my life. But I think maybe in that book, or one of the Wayne Dyer's speeches, where he says, if you truly love someone, if you think that you truly love them, let them go.
Yes. Absolutely.
Allow them to leave, and detach yourself from the outcome of all of that. And that never really rang true until now. Like, it's almost like 15 years later, I'm learning that lesson.
Yes. It's a beautiful, beautiful lesson. Like, I learned that through my partner I was telling you about before. Like, I was like, I love you so much and you deserve all the love in the world. At this point in my life, like, I can't give it to you. You can't give it to me. We deserve what we want. And and he just let go. It's such a powerful decision once you make it. Yeah. Wayne Dyer is incredible.
He is. He came to Australia probably around 2000. I'm going to say 2011, 2012. He came to Brisbane, and I wanted to see him, and I never did, and I regret it, because I think it was like maybe a year later or less.
Passed away. Yeah.
But I still listen to him now on YouTube and all that kind of stuff. He's just he's just got one of those voices that is really soothing.
Yeah. I do his meditations every morning. I do like an all meditation, and I just start my day off with a bang with him. That's great.
Awesome. I wanted to ask you, because obviously you're into men's health and mental health and all those sorts of things, and we've obviously talked a heap about relationships and all that kind of stuff, but I'm keen to know from your perspective, because obviously, to me, I'm assuming that you've gone from this almost passive male that is agreeable and didn't make decisions and wasn't really in control of a lot of his life, to one that is the antithesis of that, and is in charge and is building some sort of a legacy or a business, and becoming the man that he wants to project into this current reality. So what do you find is the thing or things that help you keep congruent and live in alignment with all of that?
Yes, that is a loaded question, and I'm going to try and answer it in a simple way. The thing that helped me the most was, first and foremost, prioritizing my health. So treating my body like a temple through nutrition, through exercise, through recovery. Because if I don't have my health, I don't have my energy. If I don't have my energy, I can't impact people. And energy is my biggest currency. People buy your energy before they buy anything else. And so I understood that. And I was like, okay, let's prioritize my health first. Once you're feeling good, then your mental health also comes right behind that. And I was going through periods of my life where I was anxious, I was depressed, and I was not doing the things that would help me be in a really good state. So that was definitely the first one. Secondly, as I grew my body, and this is a daily practice, I love to grow my mind. I'm sure you do the same, listening to a podcast, reading a book. Jim Rohn, my famous mentor, always taught me you can miss a meal, but you can't miss a book. And so every day I'm like, okay, let's read a book, because you have conversations with people, you go on podcasts, you go on dates, and the more you read, the more knowledge and philosophies you absorb, the more they come out as you're interacting with people, and it's just fantastic. And so that has been a non-negotiable for me. And then, of course, spirit. So people connect to spirit in very different ways. Jesus, Allah, the universe, whatever you want to call it, but there is that one something that we just don't know what it is, that we can connect, that we can feel. It's our heart set. We need to purify it. And I love to do breath work. I love to meditate for even just 10-15 minutes, where I just focus on not really thinking about anything and just reflecting on whatever comes through. And it's a daily practice. So in essence, to answer your question, mind, body, and spirit for sure. And then the big one for me as a man that I didn't know I had to deal with was childhood trauma. Like, I didn't know that I had a little hurt kid inside of me for many, many, many years. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, all these people are out there talking about trauma and this and that. And I'm so lucky. Like, I had a beautiful family. I've got nothing. Ego. And then I did some inner work, and I discovered that I had lots of shit to work within myself due to my father. And once I found that, I started to work towards it, and I cannot tell you how liberating it was. That had then impacted me on my relationships with my mom, with my friends, with more confidence in dating. And it's crazy how much a hurt little kid can really take control of our daily behaviors and how we show up.
Yeah, it's funny you went there, because I think that the childhood trauma is something that I've heard about for many years, and I've dismissed it pretty quickly because I don't know, it just wasn't landing for me in terms of what exactly did that mean. And I've been to certain types of therapies and things like that over the years, and nothing was really touched on in terms of childhood therapy or childhood trauma or those sorts of things. And so I never really looked at it to a large degree. But again, that's whole sort of thing about relationships that we're talking to before. It's one of those things where I figured that's why it's the biggest growth curve was the relationship, because all of that tied into that frightened little child that you were talking about that I experienced, obviously, growing up. And the thing that I want to tie into this, I'm not sure if I'm sure you would relate, because you mentioned porn a bunch of times, right? How you use it as an escape. You use it to self-pleasure, obviously, and just something that was a vice for you. And one of the things that crept up a lot in my life was not only exposure to porn from a young age, but also a couple of sexual experiences that I had as a young boy as well. And so it was things that I witnessed, like in firsthand, things that happened to me, and things that I used to watch. Like I remember watching a pornographic film at a very young age, like under 10.
Don't tell me it was Deep Throat, because that was my first one too.
Is that right? I do remember Deep Throat, actually, but no, it wasn't that. I couldn't even tell you what the name was.
Okay.
But to me, if I can be like open with you, is that I feel later on in life, the way that it impacted on me was the way that I held an opinion of myself as a man was largely predicated on my performance, for example, in the bedroom, or the size of your penis, or how many women you slept with, those sorts of things. It seemed I correlated all the way back to my childhood experiences, but porn as being closely associated, and sex and all those things through the whole. There's a common thread that goes through that whole time period, which has affected me mentally, spiritually, emotionally, like to such a degree that I never thought. I just thought it was nothing. But when I went deeper into that childhood trauma, those events, and I started to relive and undo that old program and, reprogram the mind into thinking from an adult's eyes, not looking through the world through a child's eyes, it was life-changing. It was liberating to a large degree. And when you mentioned just being under my desk crying, I felt like all of that trapped emotion came up in that spirit, that space of time. It was kind of like just erupting. It was interesting. Like I used to watch commercials and just cry, and out of nowhere, and I just couldn't realize just how much of this stuff would just keep coming up, but it would bubble up in the form of just hurt and anguish and frustration, resentment and anger, especially. Like, fuck, I used to lose my mind.
Yeah, body's way to purge. It's funny because you say this. We don't even know each other properly, but I feel as if our lives have been in parallel, because I've had also sexual experiences that have led me to then make decisions and have certain trauma. So yeah, man, I feel you.
Yeah, it's interesting. What are you doing these days? I want to, if we can wrap this up, but let me know what you're into, what you're doing, how you can help people. And I would love people to reach out to you and connect with you, obviously on Instagram, your website, your programs, and everything that you do. So
Thank you. So I have just finished writing 2 books and a journal as well. So I'm in the process of finalizing one book, which is called Connected, and it's a journey of how I went from being distracted to on purpose. And it's a journey about the mind, body, and spirit, and habits and routines, which I'm super proud of. I'm really big on routines. So I'll be publishing that very soon, and I can't wait. It's my little baby. And then with it, I have a journal. It's a gratitude and biohacking journal that just helps people with, again, daily routine, the most important things that they can do to really have a beautiful, connected day. And it's all about goals. It's about, following certain biohacks. It's about gratitude. And then I've written another book on the art of biohacking, and I will self-publish that before the end of the year, because biohacking is a massive trend at the moment, and I'm really into it. So you'll be finding some of my books coming out soon. And then apart from that, I have an online business with Isogenics, and so I help people with their health and wellness. And I also sell a digital marketing course, so all about helping people show up more authentically and on purpose on social media. So I'm very much into the space of health and wellness. And I am someone who, with work, I love to have my freedom. And so I found ways to create passive and residual income. And I'm also very passionate in showing others how to do the same. It's a really interesting topic because, so many people don't believe in this yet, but I'm here and I am proof. And I will always be that shining light that helps people that are interested in learning more.
Amazing. Well, look, Thomas, we could have gone in many different directions. I'm glad it all just unfolded the way it did. But we might have to revisit this again. There's a few avenues that I think we can explore.
Absolutely.
A bit further. But hey, mate, thank you for your time and for coming on the show. I really appreciate you. And I look forward to speaking with you again.
Likewise, man. Thank you for your energy and for being so vulnerable. I feel as if we connected really well. And speak soon.
For sure. See you, mate.
Thank you. Bye.